Welcome to my video on quadratic transformations. In this video, we're going to learn how any quadratic function can start from y equals x squared and be transformed or changed to give a different graph. So y equals x squared is a parabola. It's like that upward U-type shape with the vertex being the minimum. The first thing we're going to do is look at reflections of quadratic functions. So to make a reflection, we're going to multiply our quadratic by a negative value. What we're doing so far, we're only going to multiply by a -1 or just a negative sign, but that's going to turn it upside down. So if we want to make our function open down, we're going to put a negative outside of that x squared term. So our parent function is y equals x squared. We want to write a graph of that blue function. Well, that is just a reflection of that original graph. So the equation of that is y equals -x squared. We can also move a graph vertically, meaning up or down. To do this, all we're going to do is add, which is going to move us up, or subtract, which is going to move us down, a positive number at the end of the function. So this will not be under the squared terms. So again, we start with that parent function, y equals x squared. And I notice that the blue quadratic has been moved up 4 units. I can tell because here my vertex was at 0. But in the blue equation, my vertex is up 4. So the equation of that graph will be y equals x squared plus 4. We can also move the graph sideways or horizontally. The key thing about this is that we're going to need a parentheses around the x. When we take that parentheses, we can add, which is actually going to move us left, or subtract, which is going to move us right. Intuitively, the direction is probably opposite of what you think. And the key thing is our number will be underneath the squared symbol. It's going to be in parentheses. So from my graph, which was y equals x squared, I move left 2 to get to that blue quadratic. When I move horizontally, I'm always going to have the terms inside a parentheses. And now I'm moving left. And again, this seems opposite, but we're actually going to add 2 to move that 2 to the left. So y equals x plus 2, the whole thing squared. This sheet shows a little bit of the summary of how a graph moves. You can pause and look at these examples a little bit more if you need to. Now, these same rules apply to absolute value equations. So again, to move vertically, we're going to add or subtract at the end of the function. To move horizontally, we're going to put x inside parentheses, and then we're going to add or subtract. The absolute value sign works kind of like a parenthesis, so we don't need to use a parenthesis as long as we're inside the absolute value. And remember, to flip upside down, we're going to multiply by a negative. Let's try some. So here's our steps when we have a graph and we want to write an equation. First thing, we have to figure out if we have a quadratic or an absolute value. Quadratic is a curve, more like a U. Absolute value is a V. Then we're going to compare that to our parent function, either y equals x squared or y equals the absolute value of x. We need to determine, was it flipped upside down? How far was it moved up or down? And how far was it moved right or left? Then we put those pieces in to write our equation. Let's write the equation of this graph. So first off, looking at this picture, I can tell that this is a quadratic. The U shape tells me it's quadratic, so I know my parent function is going to be y equals x squared. That's graphed in red. The blue one has not been flipped, so it's not going to be a negative, but I can tell it's been moved. So first off, it's been moved down 2, and it's been moved right 1. Okay, so we're going to have y equals. Now I'm going to make parentheses because I know the right and left is going to have to go inside parentheses. But first, the down 2. Moving down means at the very end, I subtract 3. And then in my parentheses, to move right and left, moving right 1 means I take x minus 1 squared and then minus 3. Go ahead and check that on Desmos and see that you get that blue graph. Example number 2. Again, I have a quadratic because it's U-shaped. This is flipped upside down. That means I'm going to have to multiply by a negative. I did not move, I did move up 4, but I did not move left or right. You can go back and you can look at the rules. Since I'm only moving up and down, I don't need parentheses. However, I do need a negative to flip that upside down. So negative x squared up 4 is going to be plus 4. So that equation is y equals negative x squared plus 4. Graph number 3. This one looks a little bit different. Here I'm going to have an absolute value. This was not flipped up and down, but it was moved. So it was moved up 4, and it was not moved right or left. So my parent function, y equals the absolute value of x. Moving up and down just goes at the end. So absolute value of x plus 4. Here we have another absolute value. And this time it was flipped. Notice it opens down. I did not move right or left, I did not move up or down, excuse me. I did move left. So I moved left 3. So flipped, that means I need a negative. Put my absolute value signs. Now remember, absolute value works the same as a parenthesis. It is a grouping symbol. Because x, when I want to move left 3, inside the parentheses, or that group, I need to add 3. So my equation is y equals the negative absolute value of x plus 3. Last one, maybe pause and take a minute on your own. Okay, here we're back to a quadratic. We're going to be starting from y equals x squared. Our blue graph, yes, was flipped. It now opens down. It was moved down. So from the red, I moved down 2. And it was moved right. We went right 4. So here I'm going to need multiple pieces. First off, to flip, that's a negative. I'm going to need parentheses because I'm moving right. So inside my parentheses, I'll have x minus 4. That's squared. And then I moved down 2. So down 2. Again, reviewing each part. A negative out in front flips it upside down. What we put inside the parentheses is going to move us right or left. And then if we subtract something at the end, that will move up and down.